Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next video. In this one I'm going to be reviewing the new Sonic movie. So this is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I did review the first one on my channel like 2 years ago when it came out. And yeah, I was excited for the second one here, so let's sort of jump in. I'll do some very brief non-spoiler thoughts, but for the most part I do want to just talk openly about the movie, so most of the video will be spoilers. I'll say when I'm going into spoilers, but yeah, we'll get into it. Overall, I really liked it. I thought it was a lot better than the first movie. The first movie I rewatched last night. It was the first time watching it since I went to the cinema to see it 2 years ago. The first movie was very sort of limited because it was just sort of Sonic in an otherwise very human centric story. And while it was his arc of sort of finding a family after what happened to him, the sort of kind of Eggman origin story to a degree, it was pretty safe. The sort of typical format for doing this sort of a live action / CG movie, kind of similar to Detective Pikachu. But the main complaint was that it's maybe a little bit too human centric, and I'd like to see more of the Sonic stuff in the movie, and that's exactly what they do in Sonic 2. The movie is much more focused on Sonic. Obviously, from the trailers, Tails gets introduced, Knuckles gets introduced, Eggman obviously comes back and is a focus. The human aspect of it with Tom and everyone, they're still here, but they're more of here at the start. There's a little bit of a section towards the middle of the movie where they focus on them, and more of a sort of what feels almost solo story for them. It helps to sort of set up stuff towards the end, but for the most part the human stuff felt very separate, and then it allowed for again the majority of the movie to just focus on I think what you're here for as a Sonic fan, which is I want to see the Sonic characters interact with each other. And sure, I enjoy the human characters from the first movie to a certain degree, but they're not really what I'm here for. So I do appreciate the new sort of refocusing of everything. The main sort of theme of this movie is sort of Sonic learning to be more sort of responsible with his powers. Now that he's sort of more established out in the public a little bit more, he's trying to be the hero. And the point made by Tom in giving him the advice as his sort of father figure now is that, don't seek out trying to be a hero. There will come a time when, a hero is needed, and that's your opportunity to shine. And you just need to, grow up a little bit more, just become a bit more responsible, and that's when you'll kind of get your moment to really shine. So, again, like the first movie, it plays on some very basic but ultimately well done character arcs, dynamics between characters, in that there's nothing complicated really going on here in this movie. It's very much just this kind of found family dynamic he has found for himself, then it's finding his first friend, and they play off. It's the same dynamic for Sonic as it is for Tails. Tom is wanting sort of Sonic to find friends of his own, and so through Tails looking for Sonic to sort of find him out, he finds a friend, and then Knuckles, of course, obviously ends up also kind of becoming a friend. So, that stuff is fine, and there's definitely a sense where, Sonic does have the potential for just a little bit more in-depth sort of storytelling, but as they're sort of getting further and further into it, and potentially leaning towards this being a little bit of a kind of more long-term story, maybe told over the course of a bunch of movies, I think they'll have the opportunity to get into that, because there was little sprinklings of the sort of lore of the Sonic world in the first movie, just with regards to the very start, with the idea that oh wow, this Echidna tribe attacked Sonic and Longclaw, and what's going on here. That is obviously addressed more in this movie as they introduce more of the typical elements, and by the end of this movie there's other elements that also get introduced, and so they're building up to something I think pretty nice, and I'm very intrigued to see what they do in Sonic 3, which I'm guessing will get confirmed based on what they do at the end of this. Um, but in terms of just non-spoiler stuff, I just want to be like, yeah, I really liked it. Um, Tails, I think the little bit we saw of Tails from the end of the first movie, it was clear that okay, they're doing Tails right, and the arc that they have here for Tails works. Knuckles, as you probably have seen from the trailers, they're going for the arc of sort of he gets sort of tricked by Robotnik to join him, and have that kind of classic game arc for Knuckles. He's quite good. I honestly would say it's probably one of the better portrayals of Knuckles. I was a little worried when there's like Idris Elba as Knuckles, and it's like, okay, I trust he can do it reasonably well, but does it fit Knuckles? And it took a little bit of getting used to the voice, but by the end, I'm like, yeah, this is a really good Knuckles. I like what they've done here. There's aspects that are like very similar to other iterations of the characters, but the character, but then it also does feel like its own unique take, and actually one of the better takes on Knuckles. It feels like there's a little bit of sort of Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, as done by Batista, of course, in this. But like I think Knuckles has always had that sort of aspect to him. Instead of leaning into the sort of idea that he's strong but dumb, it's not that like he's dumb, it's just that like he maybe takes things a little bit more literally, that Tails and Sonic have an easier time like adapting to Earth, and so he's a little bit sort of oblivious to aspects of Earth culture, and it makes him kind of come across like he doesn't know what's going on. So I thought that was handled quite well, in terms of not making that like an annoying kind of character trait. Robotnik again was pretty fun. This is where like maybe one of the slight complaints about this is just that at times the tone can be a bit like, I want it to be a bit serious at this point because you're actually building up a character arc like relatively well, and they always feel the need to sort of like undercut everything with sort of, oh look, here's Robotnik being really weird, or like, maybe a joke from Sonic when it's maybe not needed at this exact point. So that's maybe one thing to maybe slightly improve on going forward, is to just like, there are decent emotional moments based on, the lore, the backstory for these characters, where the action actually takes us, and there's just a sense for just like, okay, now is not the time to go full on weird Robotnik. I get this is part of the sort of Jim Carrey performance, but now's not quite the time. Now's the time to show that he's actually being quite ruthless, and to focus on that. But again, I don't want to talk too much about that without getting into sort of spoilers, but that'd be maybe the one thing, I suppose, with where they're going, is that I'd like to see what they can do when they maybe create more of a dramatic arc, where they keep a maybe slightly darker tone. I'm not asking them to go full on super, super heavy dark, but just an arc just treated a little bit more seriously for a decent length of time. There's always like room, of course, for I suppose the fun Sonic stuff, obviously, but know when and when not to do it, I think. So moving over to spoilers, so we can talk more openly about it now. The main stuff, obviously, like the plot of like, okay, obviously Robotnik comes back into things, Tails gets introduced, Knuckles gets introduced. That was obviously covered in the trailer, and a lot of the details of how that exactly comes about it's like fairly obvious. Like, we know the rings are used as sort of portals, so that's obviously how Tails makes his way here. Robotnik was basically sort of banished to a degree, sent off to this mushroom planet that was the sort of last resort for Sonic if he needed to leave Earth, and we see how he makes his way off there, is that he has one of the quills from Sonic from the previous movie, and he uses that to power sort of like a kind of distress beacon style thing. And this is where Knuckles and some people that he's with end up sort of coming across Robotnik, and he sort of uses that to his advantage to sort of, get his way off the planet there, using the sort of ring technology that he doesn't quite have, of course. So that explains the kind of Knuckles Robotnik team up that happens in like Knuckles opening scene effectively. So that's all sort of fine. That's, I think, the classic Knuckles introduction arc, is that he sort of gets tricked by Robotnik into thinking that, like, oh, Robotnik actually is trying to help me here, because he's I think Knuckles views Robotnik and his weirdness as just being like, okay, he's just a weirdo, and doesn't quite see the undercurrent of, like, he's actually this kind of megalomaniacal kind of character. And Knuckles kind of misses that and is just as focused, oh, this guy can help me do what I want to do, which the plot of the movie actually is revolving around basically everyone trying to get the Master Emerald. So Knuckles wants it because, of course, he's from the tribe of the Echidnas, which they go into a little bit more in terms of explaining that it's effectively this sort of like ancient conflict between the tribe of Echidnas and the tribe of Owls, trying to, protect the Master Emerald. They go into the lore here, which is quite interesting, and explain that actually, like, it was the Echidna tribe in the first place who forged the 7 Chaos Emeralds, and then sort of merged them together into the Master Emerald. When they first said this, I was a little bit like, oh, so does that mean we're not doing anything with the Chaos Emeralds? That's an interesting take. But no, by the end of the movie, they basically reveal that it's more a case that, like, no, literally these 7 Chaos Emeralds were within the Master Emerald, and that the Master Emerald ends up cracking and the 7 Chaos Emeralds kind of falls out. That happens right towards the end of the movie. So by the end, they are separate things, once again, but initially it is just one thing. And I think this is a relatively okay way to do it, because you're not quite ready to do full on, like, sort of Infinity Gem thing from the Marvel MCU. So I kind of like the idea of just turning it into just like one thing, that the power is all contained in one thing, so we have to find it, and now it's out there to be used, and maybe to seek it again, based on what happens at the end here. So that was cool in terms of, like, the main sort of Sonic MacGuffin thing, how they incorporated that in. Pretty cool, because it links into, obviously, the opening of the previous movie, which is obviously that a young Sonic sent away by Longclaw, and she protects him from the tribe of the Echidnas. And this creates basically the backstory for Sonic and Knuckles, in that they covered the other side of this, which is that the tribe that went after Longclaw left a younger Knuckles behind, because this is not the mission that he has to go on. And they effectively, through, I suppose, Sonic and Knuckles both telling us their backstory, explain that, I suppose, effectively Longclaw killed all the Echidnas and they killed her. So that day is the tragic backstory for Sonic and Knuckles, and why, what sends Sonic on his path and what sends Knuckles on his path. Knuckles is sort of more angry about it, whereas Sonic is more sort of like upset about it overall. And that's the sort of situation that we find ourselves in. That's why, they're at conflict with each other, mainly Knuckles towards Sonic, because, of course, Sonic is just very out of the loop on the whole situation. Because maybe there's a line of dialogue that I didn't link onto as much, because does Knuckles say something about, like, hedgehogs in general? Because they only really focus on the idea of the, like, owl kind of tribe and the Echidna tribe. And I guess it's just because Sonic is with the owls. That's the kind of big thing. But I might be kind of completely misremembering that. But I think there was maybe a slight tease about, like, the significance of, like, Sonic being like a hedgehog. Because Sonic initially thinks that, like, Knuckles is after him because, like, oh, you want my power. But Knuckles is like, no, why would I want your power when I have my own? So they do establish that Sonic and Knuckles basically each have the same sort of core ability. It's just sort of amplified for a different thing. For Knuckles, it's his strength. For Sonic, it's his speed, of course. But they each have a little bit of the other, and that Sonic is obviously stronger than your typical, character, and Knuckles is faster than your typical character. Tails, they don't quite go into the idea that, oh, he has, like, yellow energy as such, but when he flies, he is able to keep up with them when they're like using their powers to a certain extent. So I think they're roughly trying to get across the idea that Tails has certain kind of aspect to those powers. They do establish that him having a second tail is not normal. So there is kind of, that going on. But yeah, in terms of the more like Sonic-y lore aspect stuff, I actually quite liked what they did here. Like having all this stuff that is actually ultimately quite complicated in one made for, I think, a quite interesting kind of chase scene. Like initially it's just finding the place on Earth where the owls basically put the Master Emerald into secrecy. So it's a bit of a treasure hunt at the start. Then Robotnik gets the Master Emerald, and so he becomes the sort of, godlike being almost for a while. And then Sonic gets it, which we will get to. There's a little bit more on the lore in that they go into the idea that at some point in the past, one of the echidnas used the Master Emerald, and they effectively, without showing it, got across the idea that they became like a super echidna. But the owls attacked them, managed to, temporarily stop this, and put the Master Emerald into hiding because no one effectively can be trusted to hold the power of the Master and all the Chaos Emeralds together, because it's just too dangerous, effectively. It's too chaotic, more or less. In terms of the other plots in the movie, like it starts off with like Sonic obviously trying to help, being the Batman, effectively, Blue Justice, all these kind of terms he comes up for. But he ends up kind of causing quite a lot of damage in ultimately stopping a robbery. And Tom scolds him for this, and this is where we get the, basically with great power comes great responsibility type thing. They go down like a slightly different approach in that, Tom says like his father basically told him the same advice. He is now giving that on to Sonic. You do get the interesting line for the character development between these two that Sonic is like, I thought you're my friend, so kind of, help me. You're not my dad. But at the end of the movie, it comes around and Sonic actually calls Tom dad, and like it's fully, connecting that is the way he views them as family. So that I thought was quite good. They end up going on holiday because what's her name? Maddie's sister, who was in the first movie, is getting married. So they're away from Sonic, and you have like a fun sequence with Sonic, like first time sort of in the house on his own. And while they're away, that's when all the craziness happens. That's how when Robotnik and Knuckles attack Sonic back at home, he nearly gets completely defeated here. But this is also when Tails catches up with Sonic, and that's where they meet, is basically Tails helping Sonic to get away for the first time. And so the mission to sort of like track down the ways to get the emerald kind of comes into play. Like Knuckles mentions it during this sequence. Sonic brings up the idea that like, oh, Longclaw left me this map and so on. His power is activated, and it shows like the idea of like, here's the pathway to eventually find the Master Emerald. And so this is the kind of treasure hunt kind of aspect of it. So they go to like, was it Siberia, I think they say, to try and find the compass, which eventually leads them to where the Master Emerald is. And there's a kind of fun sequence of stuff along the way. Again, there's some very fun moments, like initially with like Sonic and Tails, where like they realize they have to go into this sort of like cabin, basically this place up there in the mountains, and they realize, okay, we should probably put some clothes on. So they're wearing big winter gear, and they walk in, and Sonic's cool with this, but like Tails is kind of like, I'm not used to being in the field, I'm not good at this. And, Tails has all this technology, of course, but he hasn't quite got the translation right, so he ends up, like, insulting these people, and there's, like, a dance-off, which is quite good. And, you see the influence that Sonic is having on Tails as, again, the sort of, like, older brother, younger brother style dynamic that they have, in that they're initially doing bad. Tails is getting like really anxious, thinking that he's not good enough. But then Sonic turns on the right music for them and leads them in a pretty cool, dance sequence where their powers and like Tails' technology work quite well together, which leads into the kind of snowboarding sequence and so on, which is quite good. During this, like I think this is roughly in the time of the movie where Sonic and Knuckles have a face-off where they do get to talk to each other, and they both sort of gain an understanding that, oh hey, that day affected both of us. That's like both of our backstories. That's, we effectively lost our kind of families together that day. And they really set up the idea that, like, in the meantime, Sonic has since found like a family, people who care about him on his own, whereas Knuckles has maybe not been able to find people that he can actually truly trust. His trust is often put into people and is kind of misplaced, and you see the manipulation of like Robotnik of Knuckles and kind of saying like, "Hey, you be my friend," and that like you have the idea of like they're them doing this handshake thing. Whereas they do the sort of like power bump with the hero characters, but like it being more meaningful with the hero characters. And so Knuckles' eventual like turnaround when Robotnik betrays him and takes the Master Emerald for himself, and then he escapes, the temple collapses, Knuckles is nearly killed, Sonic saves Knuckles' life, and in the process then that leads Knuckles getting opportunity to save Sonic, and they have the kind of big heart-to-heart moment together after that, where effectively they kind of cover the idea of like Sonic found a family, Knuckles can do that too, they can be, close as well. So you get sort of the really cool moment of just the formation of like Team Sonic, basically. I was kind of waiting for the Sonic Heroes music to hit, but they didn't quite do that. I get it, maybe they don't want to be too on the nose by actually using some of the big themes from the games, but there's definitely moments in this where I feel like, come on, turn on Live and Learn, turn on Open Your Heart here for this big action moment, but that's what we get. Very quickly before I forget it, on the sort of human story. So obviously it's the wedding, and they introduced the idea of like, oh yeah, the government were kind of interested in Sonic, and they sort of get brushed off at the end of the previous movie where the main guy comes and gives them the Olive Garden voucher. It turns out that the guy that Rachel is about to marry is actually working for Gun. So they introduced the Gun organization here, and it's sort of revealed to a degree that the wedding is sort of a sham. He was just basically undercover to get close to the family, so he has sort of a connection to finding out where Sonic is. So when Sonic Sonic saves Tails, basically they save each other from getting killed during the winter sequence with the snowboarding by Tom opening up a ring for Sonic to come through. It kind of wrecks the wedding. The truth comes out because Gun come in and basically capture Sonic and Tails, because they've been after the sort of extraterrestrials. This is where they focus on the humans quite a bit, because they actually give sort of Rachel this arc of like obviously being very upset about like, oh, this whole relationship and marriage was a complete lie. And they kind of use this initially like to Maddie and her sister obviously have this sequence where they go in and try to save like Tom, Sonic, and Tails. So they use all the gadgets that were left behind in Tails' backpack. So that was a fun sequence, because you have Rachel being incredibly angry about what happened, and it actually like driving her to be quite impressive during all of this. This is a cool sequence like where she just like really does go on a rampage. But what happens in all of this is that it's actually revealed that the guy actually did fall in love with her. He sort of protects her from a taser shot, and they kind of make up, and it actually is an actual relationship. And I guess it just is meant to sort of be the introduction of like, I guess we have someone who's a part of Gun, or maybe won't be part of Gun going forward, who is, more heavily involved in things. Because they're presented as sort of being antagonists, but by the end, I think they realize, okay, Robotnik is more of the threat. We need to be more involved in things and actually like let Sonic and everyone else be the heroes. So kind of that's what's happening in like the last sequence of the movie is obviously Robotnik with the Chaos Emerald, the Master Emerald, effectively becomes sort of like Super Robotnik. He doesn't glow or anything like that. It's more like his outfit, which was previously sort of black and red, is now black and sort of like it's got green trim on it, and he's acting kind of weird because he feels like he has all the power in the world. He still is he still is the kind of eccentric character, and so he's using the powers in a weird way. It is revealed that like he has like the whole giant egg mech thing planned from before, and Agent Stone was helping set up a lot of this stuff. So that kind of comes into play, and that's basically the final kind of sequence of the movie is Robotnik in the giant egg mech suit thing, powered by the Master Emerald, is basically trying to take out Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails. So they have this is the big team up moment. It's quite well done, I think, ultimately, because obviously the military can't really do anything against them because they effectively sort of in this moment sort of get across that the powers that sort of Sonic and Knuckles specifically have is sort of related to the power that the kind of Master Emerald ultimately has, and so their powers are the only things that can really match up against it. Sonic at this point uses and sort of becomes the hero and realizes that Eggman really wants me. I can completely distract him by leading him off on my own, and that gives you two free reign to basically go in on him, which is exactly what happens. He leads the egg mech away, he insults Robotnik and so on, and that gives Tails and Knuckles the time to crawl up, because the mech is huge. It's like particularly massive here. It's one of the bigger versions of this mech I think we've probably ever seen. And this whole sequence basically ends with Tails distracts Robotnik, and then Knuckles gets the final hit. In a way, getting his revenge on Robotnik for tricking him by punching the Master Emerald out of Robotnik. Now, the Egg Mech is still a threat. It's just not powered by the Master Emerald anymore. So the Master Emerald's on the ground. Sonic has been hurt distracting the mech, and this is obviously the setup. I could tell it was coming straight away. They're going to do Supersonic, aren't they? And I thought they'd just do Supersonic with the idea that, like, oh, well, I guess in the movie canon, they're just saying that, like, all the emeralds are just one, and so all Sonic needs is this thing, and he will be able to use the Supersonic form. I was convinced they were going to do it. They do, but there is a slight twist on it. Sonic is saved from being crushed by, this is when, like, Tom and Maddie come in a car to sort of save Sonic, and they're almost prepared at this point to sort of like kind of like die as a family. It seems like this is the last ditch thing. Tails and Knuckles can't take this thing out on their own. It's so powerful, even running off its own power, not the Master Emerald power. Sonic is holding the Master Emerald, and he's trying to like activate it in some way, but then it cracks, it crumbles away, and the 7 Chaos Emeralds kind of fall out of it. And they're just on the ground. Sonic, like you have the moment between him and his family now, and effectively it's just a sort of like in their final moments they kind of all admit that they love each other as a family, and this is what activates the Chaos Emeralds. They all kind of come together, they spiral together and become part of Sonic, and he goes Supersonic. So cool moment. I think the design for Supersonic looks great here. Obviously it's just sort of Super Saiyan Sonic, of course, as we know. But it's so cool the way it's done. Obviously, he can fly straight away. He still has the speed, and he just completely obliterates basically the egg mech here. He like shaves the kind of head section off so we can see Robotnik. The arms get like obliterated, and then Eggman is quote unquote like defeated by basically Sonic tips the thing over. And because it's so huge, and I think it kind of also falls off like a cliff as well. The idea is that Eggman couldn't possibly have like survived that fall. Obviously, the idea is that he's still alive, but it was a nice way for the giant mech thing to be defeated. The big moment, though, that sort of proves the sort of character arc for Sonic is that he basically gives up the power of the Chaos Emeralds. Now, they don't really cover, if I remember correctly, what happens with the Chaos Emeralds. They basically just comes out of his body, he turns blue again, and they kind of shoot off. So I think the idea is that they've been scattered across the galaxy. So setting up that we'll probably need them again. We'll probably need like Supersonic again, and when we do that, we'll have to travel to actually seek them out. So that's cool, actually getting why the Chaos Emeralds get scattered in the first place. Knuckles picks up the sort of the cracked remains of the Master Emerald, and actually just uses his powers to kind of reforge it in his hands into, I guess, a slightly smaller Master Emerald, but that doesn't have the Chaos Emeralds in it. So this seems to be Knuckles more or less taking on the role as sort of guardian of the Master Emerald, which is kind of the role that we know of for him. So it's kind of meant to be this symbolic sort of the war in a way between the owls and the echidnas sort of coming to an end, with the owls being the previous ones sort of protecting the Master Emerald from falling into the echidna's hands so they don't misuse it, to now all of a sudden Knuckles is trusted with guarding it, I guess. They don't overly commit to that being the thing, but they have the Master Emerald with them at the end of the movie. So that's quite good. And Tails even asks, I think, Sonic, why did you give up that power? You could have been like the most powerful hero in the universe. And he just notes that, it was cool and all, but I had a lot of growing up to do. And I think it's just that idea of like Robotnik let himself, like, just his own chaotic personality just completely go wild with the power of the Chaos Emerald and just destroying everything. Sonic was able to direct it correctly, but realizes that he might have maybe become corrupted because he still is so young if he had just kept the power. So he thinks it's best to just, use it while he had control over it and leave it, and it's there to kind of be resolved. But I liked how they did that, in that like it sort of relates a little bit to kind of what we've had previously with the Chaos Emeralds, that they're like enriched by the heart, and he actually becomes supersonic during like a close moment with his family, as they think they're about to die, and him giving it up is actually like the big kind of hero move actually. So that was cool. And then the end sequence is just a fun sort of like family and friends outing. We go back to like the baseball kind of stadium. They're having a baseball match, but now Sonic actually has some friends to play with instead of having to do the whole match on his own. No, he can actually like be the commentator as like Tails pitches for Knuckles and so on, and then he can play other roles as well. That was cool to see. And it's just like right at the end you see a more relaxed Knuckles, so you get to see more of his character right at the end. And yeah, this is what the team is. This is what the dynamic's going to be like. Really good. And then we get the tease for, I suppose, effectively Sonic 3, and that is we cut back to sort of the gun organization cleaning up the wreckage of the kind of egg mech. And one of the officers kind of comes up and said like, what was it? We've just like unearthed like a data report from like, was it 15 or I think it was 50 years ago. And they kind of cut to this kind of container. There's like a cylinder, and you pan down and it's Shadow. And I think they say something like, is it Project Shadow or Operation Shadow? They say that like, okay, like it's some sort of a thing that is known about related to Shadow, and Shadow has now woken up. So Shadow is, I guess, going to be the plot point of the next movie. Interesting. Now, obviously, I think the director had come out just before this and sort of said that in terms of future movies, they're not going to be going in sort of direct chronological order with the games. So if they were doing that, you would maybe realistically expect the next enemy to maybe be like Metal Sonic or something like that. But I actually appreciate them jumping ahead to, I suppose, a character that is ultimately more of a character and more of a, I guess, a fan favorite overall. They can do Metal Sonic whenever they need to. This, I think, makes sense as like a big third thing, the sort of Sonic clone type thing. I'm very interested to see what they do with Shadow's story in this, because I always like Shadow as a character. Sonic Adventure 2 is definitely some of my favorite Sonic stuff. So will they do all of that? I guess they'll do some of it, because it implies that this means like humanity, I guess, has known about Shadow secretly for a certain amount of time. So there's a deeper connection of the planet with the rest of the sort of galaxy, because again, this is where the Master Emerald was, and so on. Like it's interesting, like to just kind of know all that stuff, that there is that sort of, okay, Earth is actually connected more into the Sonic story stuff through a lot of what's actually happened here. And I think Shadow is a good option to do next. Now, will they do a lot of the other stuff surrounding that, like introduce Rouge and E102 Gamma? Maybe. Team Dark. Are we going to do like the rest of this? Are we going to introduce Amy, Big the Cat? Are we going to introduce like Cream and Cheese? Chows? Will Chows get introduced? That all that sort of stuff is like really interesting. And there's like Team Chaotix as well. So Charmy, SBO, and Vector, which I suppose I'll bring up at this point. There is also extra material for this. IDW released a one-shot comic. That's the official movie prequel. Now, there's not too much to say about it in that it's basically it's 6 short stories that effectively show you what a bunch of the characters are doing basically right before the movie begins. So more of sort of Robotnik planning on the Mushroom Planet. It's the most interesting one is probably Stone taking control of the coffee shop and then executing Robotnik's contingency plan to sort of turn it into like the base of operations. And I guess a lot of the preparation stuff for the giant egg mech as well is sort of the implication of this. It shows Tails on sort of Sonic's trail to sort of find him. It shows Knuckles also on the same trail, and how he ended up with the people he was with at the start. It's a very like basic prequel, but it is decent with what they do. But like you get to see like Casino Night Zone and stuff like that very briefly here. You can see it there. And you can sort of see in the background there that there is Vector. That's clearly Vector, SBO, and I don't think Charmy is here, but it's either just a random cameo of just like, hey, these are known Sonic characters, or no. In the movie universe, like Vector and SBO are here, which is kind of interesting in terms of like the main teams from like Sonic Heroes. I wouldn't mind that happening. And I guess with Paramount Plus, like you do have the option to do a lot of Sonic stuff. I've heard like rumors that are they doing a Sonic show? I don't even know. I might just be completely making that up, but I'd like to see what they do here in terms of if they do any extra stuff in this sort of new movie continuity, because Sonic definitely has the room to, for another story focused continuity, because I think otherwise like a lot of the games aren't super connected to each other, and then the ones where they maybe are, again, it's maybe only 1 or 2 games, so there's not too much story, which leaves kind of like the comics as for the most part being some of the main story content for Sonic. Otherwise you're talking about like the different animated series, some of which aren't super plot focused, some other ones are a little bit more. Like I've always liked Sonic X and felt that because it sort of covers the adventure story and as more of a story content, has been some of the best. I wouldn't mind if they just really committed to this as being like, yeah, this is going to be a big Sonic kind of continuity. We're going all in on it. And the fact that they've already set up a 3rd movie now seems pretty good. So, yeah. I came into the first movie just feeling like, okay, there's potential here, but I want more Sonic, and I think they did everything they needed to do with the 2nd movie. Again, was it perfect? Not necessarily. Again, just maybe from the tone kind of point of view of just like, I would like to see maybe the next movie be just a little bit more serious. Have Shadow actually introduce maybe a proper level of like darkness into the story, that isn't immediately sort of undercut by like Sonic joking around or Eggman's kind of like crazy goofiness, and see how that works, because I think there is a lot of potential with just some of the lore that they have set up here. And now here's more of a maybe like human-centric aspect to it, and like if they can do some of the Shadow backstory like they did in like Adventure kind of 1, 2 and stuff like that, I think this could be good. So in the comments, if you've seen Sonic the movie 2, let me know what your thoughts are on it, and like how much of an improvement or not you felt it was from the first movie, and where things are going to go from here. But other than that, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.